Good morning, everybody. This weekend I was walking with my son. We had our two dogs. We were on our way to get pup cups. Everybody know what a pup cup is? A little ice cream cup for your dog, summer treat. And we walked past the house. My son says to me, "Do you hear that?" I heard nothing. I look over to him, I'm like, "No, I don't hear anything." He looks at me incredulous, like, "You're lying to me, right? You don't hear that." I'm like, "No, seriously, I don't hear it." Apparently there was a high-pitched noise. Somebody had there's like coyotes where we are, so somebody must have had something to scare away the coyotes. And so I looked at my son and I said, "Look, I listened to a lot of really loud music when I was young, went to concerts, blared it in my room and in my car, and I've kind of lost all the high-pitched hearing in my ears. So I can hear fine, just I can't hear that." I think that's how a lot of people feel about AI right now. There's just so much noise out there, there's so much innovation, it's hard to tell fact from fiction. So what I'd like to talk about this morning is a bit around some stories of what we see is working, why, what's not working, why, and then at Genpact, how we've tried to distill that into some principles of how you can help your clients, your organizations, really get business value out of AI, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do as an organization. So without further ado, talk about some examples. So is there anyone in the room here who hasn't heard about the Klarna example? Okay, didn't think so. So probably the best example right now of using AI in customer care. They've been able to eliminate roughly 700 jobs or positions, I'll come back to that in a moment, through having AI models that are in 35 different languages. It's actually cut down about 2/3 of their inquiries, right? So it's actually gotten the number of inquiries down. What people don't talk about much, though, is they still have 2,000 customer service agents, right? Those people, in theory, right, they're working on higher value cases. They're actually helping customers. They're hopefully giving actual better care to the customers, not just calling up and saying, "Hey, I've got to spend 10 minutes researching data and information to get you what you need," right? So I think we talk a lot about, how the concept of AI can eliminate work, which is great. I think what we need to focus a lot more on is how are we actually using AI to get better outcomes. So we'll talk about this in some other examples as well, but this is a great success story in terms of how they're doing it. In fact, most of what they're using that excess capacity to do is to actually enable the growth of their business. Drug discovery. So probably everyone here knows someone or is someone who's afflicted with a chronic disease. So this area is pretty mature in AI, right? There's probably been around for almost 10 years, I'd say. And if you look at the pace at which things are happening, especially in the last 3 years, it's really, really fascinating, right? So you've got companies like Lantern Pharma, where they've brought 3 drugs to the clinical trial stage within 3 years. So anybody who's been around the life sciences industry for a while, it's typically a decade-long process, billions of dollars, to even get products to the clinical trial stage, right? In 2015, there was exactly 1 AI-designed drug that was in clinical trials. As of the end of 2023, there were 67. So as of right now, there's not a single drug that has actually made it out into the market yet, but it's only a matter of time. So this is an area where I'm really, really excited. But again, where are the barriers going to be to the implementation here? I'm actually really impressed. The FDA has actually already approved about 700 models. They've come up with new ways of getting things through the process. They're doing really, really good work. But I actually think that's not going to be where the bottleneck is. So I recently had the opportunity to visit a cancer care center. So imagine a room, if you haven't been in one, that's maybe 15 by 15 meters, 50 by 50 feet. Dozens of comfy chairs, some of them out in the open, some of them in little cubicles, and a bunch of people hooked up to IVs. Got probably half a dozen nurses, providing wonderful care. You've got an oncologist that stops in and sees people. You've got other specialists that come in and do consults. If we find a cure for cancer, or cures for cancer, what happens to that cancer care center? What happens to the billions of dollars of capital that's been put into that entire care industry around, frankly, treating disease, not curing disease? And we'll talk about this later when we talk about operating models in companies, but I think that's what we've got to spend more time thinking about, is how do we actually think about how things get transformed and mean consequences when we actually come up with all of these great innovations. So lightening up a little bit, let's talk about mayo, my favorite condiment. So if you're familiar with the consumer goods industry, one of the key areas of applications of AI right now is around new product development. So companies like Unilever, they've come up with zero salt alternatives through different AI combinations. They've actually recently released a vegan Hellmann's mayonnaise that actually tastes like mayonnaise, right? If you look in other areas of consumer goods, companies like Mars are actually using AI to better think through their sustainability strategies around their product packaging. So anybody who's gotten M&Ms in the last couple of years will know that they're paper again. So for a while they were actual foil packages that didn't biodegrade, couldn't really be recycled very easily. They're actually looking at their entire product mix to actually try to get to sustainable packaging, and they're using AI in the way that they actually predict and figure out whether or not that works. Companies used it during the Russia-Ukraine crisis to determine new formulations for products when they had supply bottlenecks. AI in agriculture, I worked there decades ago. I mean, it's a very mature domain, in terms of improving crop yields, looking at different bioengineering of different seed science, things like that. This is an area that's like super mature, but we talk a lot about content management and marketing and hyper-personalization with AI. I'm kind of pumped about like personalization of food, right? Like coming up with really new and interesting types of products. And again, when we talk about AI, we talk about a lot of the productivity benefits, but think about like in consumer goods, we're going to come up with cool new products, right? They're yummy, tasty, make more money, probably more profitable. So I think as we think about where to apply AI in our organizations, we've got to be thinking about the front office as well. So what's not working? So I had really, really high hopes that by the time my kids reached driving age, they wouldn't have to get their license because there would be self-driving cars. My son is now 15, and unfortunately, I'm starting to research practical safe cars for him, right? This is one that just fundamentally hasn't worked. You have the most valuable company, Apple, couldn't figure this out, right? They gave up. 99.999% accurate is just not good enough when you're talking about people's lives. And when you think about this, there is no FDA equivalent for all of the roads, right? Like the regulatory complexity, state by state, country by country, really, really complex to make that work. Cars break down on the side of the road all the time. If you have a Waymo car that breaks down in the city of San Francisco, it's on the front page of the news, right? So a lot of this is cultural and regulatory that I think it's going to be a long time. I know Tesla says that the robo-taxi's coming in October. I'm sorry, I'm not placing that bet, right? I think it's just going to be really, really difficult for all of that to actually happen in the short term, right? I think it will happen, but it's going to have to take, look, again, operating model. We're going to have to figure out how the roads change. Do you need to dedicate a lane on the side of a highway overnight for semi-trucks to drive, autonomously from point A to point B? Like, I think there's going to have to be other solutions that come up that are just practical to enable these things to work. So what about us at Genpact? What have we learned? So as a company, we are just acutely focused on AI-first solutions for our company. So anytime a company comes to us and says, hey, I've got a problem, the first thing we ask our people to do is think through, how can you apply AI in this context? What we've learned through that is that you just can't take a one-size-fits-all approach. Company by company, it's very different. You've got some companies that are AI first, you've got others that want to be fast followers. It's really different. And I think there's one example I was involved with recently, which I thought was just pretty telling, and we've learned a lot from it, where we had a big financial services company come to us and say, hey, we want to transform our finance function, we want to be AI first. Top leadership's like, yeah, we got to be AI first. We ask our teams, okay, pull out all the stops. Let's put all the cool stuff into this one, right? So we design all the solutions. We have probably a dozen different AI interventions. You add up all the costs, and there's no business case for it. I think this is something we'll talk a little bit more about later is, this is not a tool that's just about, automating steps in a process. You've got to think through how do you fundamentally change work, and you got to be smart about where you use it, right? So that's something that for us has been a really big learning. All right, so what does that all mean, right? So we've had some successes, we've had some failures. What we've done at Genpact is we try to distill this into 5 pretty simple principles that we think, whether you're in the professional services industry, servicing companies, or whether you're running AI for your own company, these are things that you can think through pretty pragmatically to help you drive, again, better outcomes from AI, actually getting the benefits. Prioritization, purposely number 1. So one of the things that we've asked our company to do and all of our teams to do is think pretty deeply about the where, right? Where do you use AI? So this next chart, purposefully impossible to read. It is also not complete. This is just a subset. We've actually had all of our functional expertise teams pull together this capability map. So point 1, purposefully not a process map. We don't want to speed up steps. We want to understand the outcomes of work and how do you do it better. On the right side, you'll see customer care. A lot of dark blue. What does dark blue mean? Dark blue means AI first. Those are areas where we think there's going to be the largest disruption. The second tier, the slightly lighter blue, that's AI enabled. So we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to step 2, but these are areas where we believe AI should be embedded in the process to enable work to flow more successfully. And then the last area, the lightest of the blue, is AI supported. So this is a place where you'll have a co-pilot, there'll be another tool that will assist you kind of on the side, maybe a little bit of swivel chair. So when we talk about this, right, I think, the customer care example is easy. But let me maybe throw out an example that's maybe not as easy. So if you shift over to the left side of the chart, you look at the deliver area. That's part of what's called the SCORE model in supply chain, plan, source, make, deliver. So people who work in this area often include some of your customer service people that are logistics execution people, actually figuring out which truck is going to pick up what product on a given day. These people's lives, my wife's actually a supply chain leader, so I hear about it all the time. It's about dealing with exceptions, right? When it's the happy path, stuff just works, but all day, every day, they're dealing with exceptions. When you think about a tool like AI, right, giving them all of the information at that point in time to help them make the next best action in that sequence, that is prime for AI. So what we're doing as a company is we've taken this map, and now this is informing how do we actually innovate and how do we actually invest as a company. So as an example there, I see my friend Ashwin over there. He led a workshop with our team in that space a couple weeks ago where we've actually gone through and we're putting together, like, what do we think is the best way to deliver capability to customers. So I'd encourage all of you to kind of think this way, right? Like, where are the places in your company where you think is going to be the most value? I think a lot of us kind of do this a little bit more bottom up, right? And like, here's ideas that we kind of staple together. But again, that was one of our learnings. When we do it bottom up, it becomes very difficult to really, really tie it directly to the business outcome. All right, so let's talk about people for a second. So I hope all of you at this point have had some sort of a program like we've had that's educating all of your people on AI, right? If you haven't done it, of course you need to do that. The other thing I hope is that you've identified people in your organizations that they just get this. They love it. They want to go play with Perplexity and do prompts and all that kind of stuff. It's their jam. Get them out there, innovating, teaching other people in your organization. Cool. Absolutely need to do that. Let's talk about a couple of roles in a company. So I've spent a fair amount of time around accountants in my career. Probably met my first one 25 years ago. And if I'm to place a bet on 2 screens that an accountant will have up on their computer at any period of time, and I'm not allowed to pick a browser, the 2 screens I'm going to pick is their ERP system and Excel. So when you think about that person and how they do work, if you're asking them to go to an AI tool that's over here in another system, you're actually making their life more complicated. So one of the things we need to be thinking about is, how do we bring the AI to the person, right? So how Do we do like what Microsoft is trying to do with their Copilot that they just released in beta, be fully released in the fall? How do you use a tool like that to help with some of the areas in finance that are just, they're busy work, things like reconciliations of accounts, right? How do you do that in the flow of work? That's why we're really excited about some of the innovation that they're bringing to market, and we're working with them on it, because it's going to be right there where a person can use it every day in their life. So another example, talked about cars before. I love cars. So one of my rides is a 2020 Chevy Silverado pickup truck. I think anybody who's owned a Chevy it's not the most reliable car. I love the car, but it's not the most reliable car. The infotainment system has what I can best categorize as demons. It just doesn't work sometimes when you start up the car, especially if you're trying to back it up and hitch it to a trailer. That's the one time it will always not work. So I've gone into the shop quite a few times to the dealership to try to get fixed. And look, I'm actually pretty relaxed about it. Cars break, stuff breaks. I'm an engineer. I actually kind of like when stuff breaks because I like fixing things. What frustrates me is that when I go to the dealership, for some reason, they have no idea that I brought the car in 3 times before for the same thing. They're suggesting to me things that were already done before. I'm actually pulling up Google and hitting a forum and telling them, hey, this other guy says this works, should you try this, right? That's ridiculous, right? And first of all, the poor technicians probably hates me at this point. I, as a customer, am really, really unhappy, right? One of our partners, though, is solving this problem. So they're working with Salesforce, and in the service management platform, they've built AI actually for another auto manufacturer that pulls in all of the individual service history for your car, pulls in warranty information, pulls in standard operating procedures for different things you might do to fix it, even pulls in some external data to tell the service technician, this is the thing that you should go try to do. I imagine many of your companies have a lot of people out there fixing stuff, right? This is another area where we're really excited that we think there's going to be a ton of innovation in this space, and it's going to enable a lot of people to do better work. And again, you can think about this in context of productivity benefits. But what about the opportunity that you gain when you have a service technician in a field that's spending less time fixing stuff, and they can actually use that time with the customer to try to sell some more stuff, right? So there's more revenue management that can also get out of this as well. So, one of the things as you go through your strategies of how you put in place AI for your companies is, think about the people, right? Think about those jobs that you have in your organization where there's just a lot of waste in the system, and that's a prime place to experiment with AI. All right, so let's talk a little bit about data, right? Everybody wants perfect data. Perfect data is impossible, garbage in, garbage out. So if you're going to go try and train models and you have bad data, you're sunk, right? So not surprisingly, a lot of our customers are talking about, hey, maybe a great first step with AI is to strengthen my data core, right? But how exactly do you do that, right? There's so much out there. So the thing that we've come up, and this has been a little bit of openly trial and error, is that, again, if you go back to a business outcome focus. So traditionally, organizations will measure data in terms of data quality of the customer master, and you're 99% accurate of your data. But you got a huge issue with outstanding receivables. So if the business outcome you're trying to drive is improved receivables, how do you figure that out, right? So, of course, there's customer data, but then you've got the finished product master, you have pricing data, you got contract data. And what we often find, and we've built some tools around this, is when you start to compare all that data, it is not synced up. And one of the biggest reasons why you end up in exceptions, which is why you end up often having open receivables, is because you simply aren't aligned with your counterparty around how much they should have paid for what. That's happening because, in many cases, with bad data. So what we're doing with our clients a lot right now is that we're starting with those key business outcomes, tracing it through to all of the data to drive those business outcomes, and then purposefully apply AI to fix that data in a purposeful way, right? We're not trying to solve perfect data everywhere. So again, that's a bit of a technique that we've learned. From a technical architecture perspective, the key here is all about robust yet flexible. So I'm sure all of you have, whether you be in your organizations or working with your clients, spend a lot of time on the infrastructure and operations, right? Making sure that you've got your hyperscalers chosen, you understand the security components. All of that needs to be completely locked down and standardized, right? The next layer up that we build is, we call it this core component layer. So this is the application layer. This is where you have your models. The thing here is, this is, I use the term, it's horses for courses here, right? This isn't going to be something where you're going to say, hey, I'm only going to use this model type in my company. Like different models, I said there's 700 different models that have been approved just for drug discovery by the FDA, right? You're going to have lots of different models, but it does need to be controlled. Like within your organization, you need to have your form of FDA approval for the models that you can actually use, right? It shouldn't just be infinite, and it's got to be controlled. But the thing I don't think we talk enough about, and it's back to the persona piece, is this user experience layer. And making sure that your AI meets your end users where they work. And making sure that you've built this in a flexible way that it can extend into different platforms in your organization. And I think, some of the tech providers out there right now, I think Salesforce is one. I think with their data cloud and the approach that they're taking, I think it works very well for this, right? They're not saying you have to use this model or that model. They're building a pretty flexible architecture through their data cloud to enable the user experience to show up where they are. Not every tool is architected like that, but I think that is a great way to think about it in terms of how to build your own architectures within your company. Then the fifth principle is around operating model. So I'm sure some of you heard the story. Starting in right around 1780, there was a series of innovations in the UK around textile manufacturing. And they basically cut the price of producing textiles, some would say about in half. Around 1800 in India, they had about 30% of the world market of textile manufacturing. 30 years later, it was down to 15%. By the middle of the century, it was effectively gone. Millions of people lost their jobs. AI will do this, but it's not going to be over the course of a half century. It's going to happen a lot faster. I also personally don't believe it's going to be across all industries. It's going to be in pockets within organizations. And we all need to be thinking about how is it going to impact our organization, and the next 2 years are going to be really, really important. So as you go back to your work and you listen today, I'd encourage you to just have a strategy around this, right? Think about those 5 principles. Do it in a structured way. This isn't just about little innovations and who's built the coolest model. We've got to be really thinking broadly about how this impacts our organizations and people. So thank you very much for the time. Super excited to meet many of you throughout the day, and enjoy the rest of the day.